Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Shreyaya. Joining me today is Utsav Chakraborty and Sehun Kim as we dissect the aftermath of the Dalai Lama's 90th birthday celebrations. Who came, who stayed away, what does it mean? What are the message that these Buddhist nations are giving, including India, and why is China having its knickers in a twist? You can see from the comments and the messages, statements being put out that China does not like it one bit. Why? All these and more. Let's welcome our guests. Sehun, Utsav, Namaskar. How are you?
Namaste, Shri. We are good.
Namaste, everybody. Thank you so much, Shriji, for just inviting us again together.
Thank you so much, Sehun. I'll start with you, Utsav. Utsav, two things happened. Bhutan said that, yes, we are, they sort of, what I should say is, they supported the fact that Dalai Lama is our spiritual head. I don't know the exact verbiage used. Now, in diplomatics, you need to look at the verbiage used. So, as a common man, I saw that Bhutan says that he's our spiritual head too. So this is like recognition, right? A country being recognized, a spiritual leader is being recognized. I did not see anything pro or against from Sri Lanka, which is interesting in itself. And I didn't see anything from other so-called Buddhist nations, including, I think South Korea is still probably Buddhist, I don't know. Basically, be that as it may, many countries haven't said anything, but Pema Khandu, the chief minister of Arunachal Pradesh, was there. He made some strong statements. I would like you to think in the totality of what happened, whether India is now beginning to start playing the Tibet card, and how do you see this proceeding? First with you, Utsav, and then I'll come to you, Sehun.
Sri, thank you for inviting us. The first thing is that, United States and China and Taiwan also made statements commemorating the 90th birthday of His Holiness Dalai Lama. So that's also very important. Now, given the points you raised in terms of India asserting itself, so the 90th birthday was a very critical day. It signifies the longevity of His Holiness Dalai Lama's presence. It signifies the fact that he has outlasted the major communist dictators that have ruled China since Mao Zedong, and that's a statement in itself. So that statement, I think China doesn't like, and India, as well as some of the countries that celebrated the birthday, kind of underlined that statement. And it kind of also alluded to the point that Xi Jinping will also be outlasted by the Dalai Lama. And I think that was an important thorn in China's side in terms of the messaging. I think India also made it very clear that the wishes of the Tibetan Buddhist community and Dalai Lama's reincarnation are going to be respected, because this is the most important spiritual issue of our times for the Buddhist community. And I think that's very assertive, because that essentially sets up Tibet for the next 100 years and the way Tibet is going to fall in terms of its geopolitical presence. So I think all those things were very important, and I think all those things mattered in the global sense. And I think China is bothered by it, but it shows that India is being more assertive. It shows that countries around China that have respect for Tibet also are rising to the occasion, but it left much to be desired from countries like Japan and some of the Indo-Pacific countries like Thailand and Sri Lanka and all those countries.
Thank you so much, Utsav. Sehun, I invite your comments on this topic. How did you see it? You've grown up in South Korea for some part of your childhood. I don't know when you came to United States. You can tell us a little bit about that, growing up and so on and so forth. And how does an average South Korean see this whole thing? I did not see any comments from South Korea either. So you can, set us straight on how you think that the Korean community is looking at this.
Okay, well, thank you, Shriji, for, again, inviting us here today. I think, firstly, the most important thing to point out for all of this is that the Dalai Lama system has a guarantee of continuation for the next 100 years or however long. And I say that because there was a statement that was published from the office of the Dalai Lama, where they said after his passing, the reincarnation issue will be handled by a proper authority that's actually currently located in India, where the Tibetan exiles have established themselves very well and strong for the last few decades. Now, another very important point to see is that for the first time in history, and I say history, we're seeing that the Chinese Communist Party specifically is losing grip over the narrative. Up until now, the CCP was able to basically control the narrative in terms of the reincarnation issue of so many other lamas. Again, Tibetan Buddhism has a lot of other lamas that reincarnate. It got to a point where they actually have, and believe it or not, they actually have what you would call a ministry of reincarnation. Basically, if you're believed to be reincarnated, you have to register with the government. It's funny coming from a government that's technically atheist, right? And they shouldn't be believing any of these things, right? But they still make people to register with them, right? In terms of their reincarnation. Now, they've also made a very bold statement a few years ago when the question of the reincarnation topic came up by the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama simply said, "Look, we will have to see, but it may not continue on after me." And that's when China became extremely angry, and they said, "No, you must reincarnate, and if you don't reincarnate, it's a huge disrespect against the system, and since the system belongs to China, it's a disrespectful act against all people, not just the Tibetans, but to all China," as if that really mattered in the first place, right? Because at the end of the day, it is a religion that not only has followers of the Tibetan origin, but now, decades forward, we have so many people who actually identify as Tibetan Buddhists. And that's the other thing that needs to be pointed out, is that Tibetan Buddhism is no longer a religion of Tibet or just of South Asia. It has become a religion of so many people around the world. And on top of adhering to the religious beliefs, you also have non-Tibetan Buddhists who sympathize with the Tibet issue. And that's where individuals like myself come in, is that, although we don't adhere to the religion itself, we firmly believe that by the resilience of the Tibetan people, of course, and really the guidance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but more importantly, the future of Tibet and what happens to Tibet can be a catalyst for so many nations that are trying to be free from tyranny, particularly within China. And so there's one aspect of that there. But also, in terms of going back to the reincarnation issue, is that the reincarnation issue is extremely important for the Tibetan people, solely because of the fact that it is, in a sense, a continuation of the survival of their religion. When they became exiled, the number one thing that they were able to hold on to was their religion. They've done an incredible job in terms of promoting it. And so I would even say, if you're asking me about what should happen next, well, I think one of the next things should happen is probably the promotion of the Dalai Lama's view on the reincarnation itself, and really to help protect that statement that came out just a few days ago, that the reincarnation issue is solely dependent on the proper Tibetan authorities located in India itself. And that could be done, I would say, by the diaspora communities around the world, particularly those of the Dharmic religions, coming out and say, well, we also recognize that fact, just like how Bhutan did, of course, and just letting China know that it quite literally stands alone in its statement and beliefs, and that's just the way it's going to be, and they're just going to have to learn to live with it. So,
thank you so much, Sehun. Utsav, just 1 second. Let me bring you up full screen. Utsav, Hanification of China. They have overtly attempted to, force Han culture on their outlying states, such as territories, I should say, such as Tibet as well as Xinjiang province. And in your opinion, how much have they succeeded? Because this is the first time where the Tibet itself is now being looked at as perhaps a mix. And we don't know what the youth in Tibet are thinking. Your thoughts on that? Go ahead.
So we have to acknowledge the fact that the Chinese have been spending the last 50 years hanifying Tibet, and there are the monasteries in Lhasa, the junior clergy. They have all been subjected to the brainwashing of the CCP, the Communist Party. So there has been a significant effort put in and significant amount of resources put in by China to de-religionize Tibet and make it into an image of Han China. We have to admit that, we have to acknowledge that. Not only that, I can even go on to say that China has put in tremendous amount. And when I say China, it's not the people of China, it's the CCP.
CCP, of course.
Yeah, it puts a tremendous amount of resources in Western countries to try to steal Tibetan Buddhist institutions away from the Dalai Lama and his followers. I can go on to say that in America itself, there are quote-unquote meditation schools that mirror Tibetan practices that have been set up by the Chinese intelligence all across America. And they have been doing it for the last 10, 15 years. Most of us who are part of the Hindu community, the Dharmic community, and we connect, as part of Hindu Action, we connect with the Buddhist community. We are very well aware of the amount of resources being spent by the Chinese to take over the spiritual aspects of Buddhist practices in Western countries. So it is a real problem, and we will have to deal with that problem as we go forward. But one thing that I really want to underline that Sehun pointed out is that Tibetan Buddhism specifically, but all the Dharmic communities, including the Hindu community in general around the world, do acknowledge Dalai Lama's position. We are very vociferous in our support for Dalai Lama's position, and that offsets some of the brainwashing and the hanification that has been done within Tibet. That also gives us that opportunity to help the Tibetan Buddhist community because we believe in reincarnation. There are 1.3 billion Hindus in the world who believe in reincarnation. The philosophy roots are the same, and the theology is from the same base. So we can help in reinforcing the fact that the Dalai Lama's position needs to be respected for the future of Tibet. And Tibet, in general, historically has always been the backyard of Dharmic faiths originating from India. So, even today, despite all these hanification that has been done by the CCP, they haven't been able to change the Tibetan script. The Tibetan script, as a Bengali, it looks so familiar to me because it has the same roots. And I think those are some of the things that we need to continue to pursue and push forward and ensure that in the rest of the world, this hanification is mitigated and Tibet is rescued, if I can put it that way.
Thank you so much. And Sehun, I have a question for you. If you look at the Dashavataram, which is a philosophy in Sanatana Dharma, where God comes in the form of a human being to restore the order. And the 7th avatar was Rama, 8th was Krishna. On 9th, there is some dual views here. It could be either Balarama or it could be Buddha. So in other words, in Hinduism, Buddhism is an integral part. People don't really look too much into this, and I'm also inclined to believe it is Buddha that was the avatar. The reason being, Balarama is supposed to be Adisesha. So if you are having one avatar, Krishna, and his associate, then how come you're not doing the same thing in the previous avatar of Rama? Because Lakshmana is supposed to be what Balarama is to Krishna. So there are parallels. So if you say Lakshmana is not an avatar, then you apply the same thing, Balarama also is not an avatar, then it must be Buddha. So in other words, Buddhism is a very integral part of Hinduism. It may not come out this way. And all of us have to go back and dig deep here. So the Buddhist community shouldn't feel that we need to take this thing, take the yoke and run. Hinduism is completely with them. But Utsav didn't exactly answer the question, what the percentage of Hanification that has happened so far. Maybe you have some insights into this. What I'm trying to say here is, this is as much a battle of Hindus as it is of Buddhists, is all I'm trying to say. Your thoughts on the Hanification of Tibet?
That's a very easy question to answer. Is that if you look at, all you need to do is just simply look at what's happening inside Tibet, right? But let's touch upon history a little bit. The Tibetan script, like Utsav rightly said, is originally from Sanskrit. Matter of fact, when Tibet didn't have a writing system, it was actually the Indian intellectuals, right? May have been yogis, may have been religious figures, may have been just simple philosophers, right? They were the ones who actually brought the writings, brought the seed, I would say, that became the beautiful Tibetan writing system that we see today. That's one. And number two, let's look at it from even a modern context. I haven't met a single member of the Hindu community who was uncomfortable praying at a Hindu temple. Matter of fact, they have said that this is just like being at a Hindu temple, because there's so many similarities, right?
Yes.
For example, there's the green Tara, right? Tara is actually worshipped within Hinduism. The whole reincarnation, right? The different forms of emotions, right? Those are also all present within Hinduism as well. And even the Ramayana, I mean, you have to understand, one of the reasons why the Ramayana actually survived up until this date is because during the Mughal rule, the Hindu philosophers or the yogis actually brought the scripts that had the story of the Ramayana in it into Tibet, and that was able to be preserved to that degree. So again, when you say that there is an inseparable connection between Hinduism and Buddhism, I mean, there's a clear example right there. I would also say, in touching upon the Hanification of Tibet, when you compare it to the Indian origins, let's say, right, of Tibet versus the Chinese influence in it, you can clearly see that the Indian the influence into Tibet is something that's natural and inseparable. Whereas when it comes to the Chinese, it's not really even fully Hanification, because again, that can mean a lot of things, right? But this is more of a communistic, imperialistic old Chinese imperialistic approach into taking over what is Tibet. And because the Chinese know that their claim over Tibet is extremely weak. And if anyone has a claim over Tibet, it's really the Indian subcontinent, right? They had open borders up until the Chinese invasion in the 1950s. They every foreigner, actually, even in the times of the 13th Dalai Lama, after his passing, every foreigner in the world was barred from entering into Tibet except the members of the Hindu community, except Indians. And that is because they recognized and shared the inseparable dharmic connections. Where in terms of China, I mean, they do this. Again, this is why I say outsiders like myself need to pay attention to what is happening inside Tibet, because China has successfully not only invaded the land, but has done everything and anything that they can to legitimize their control, even if it meant the destruction of 6,000 monasteries. And forgive me when I say this, but nuns and monks were made to do horrific things in the streets, and children were actually encouraged to kill their parents, right, during the Cultural Revolution inside Tibet. And even just going back to the reincarnation issue, I mean, it's a job of the Panchen Lama that decides or even guides the process of reincarnation. They've actually kidnapped the reincarnated Panchen Lama, and nobody knows where he is. Right. And so for them to say, well, this is a Chinese issue, I mean, this is just, even in the logical sense, it's a ridiculous thing. And again, it goes back, that also still goes back to this Hanification of Tibet. I would even say that more important term to remember in this is the Han shogunism that is ever present inside Tibet. And we see in the what's known as Xinjiang, or what I would call East Turkestan, or even southern Mongolia, right? They even done it to the Cantonese people, for example, right? Cantonese is extremely well discouraged, right, in the language now, and so they have it. It goes back to the party's willingness to go to any extent to assert their control. And I will summarize. I will finalize by saying that this isn't the takeover of Tibet. Wasn't an attack just against the Tibetan people. It was an attack against this dharmic identity that's been in that part of the region for such a long time. Imagine, think about it from China's perspective. If they can be able to control this entity, right, control this dharmic, body that's existed there for thousands of years, what else can't they control? They've already controlled the Mount Kailash to a point where they invited a bunch of journalists from India for this propaganda tour, right before the Dalai Lama's birthday, to show how nice Tibet really was. But again, it goes back to the definition of what really is nice. It's nice because the Han Chinese control it and they put out the narrative for the world.
Thank you so much, Sehun. Utsav, last question for you. Mm-hmm. You see that this is now building up. India has said, okay, you don't like Dalai Lama, we are going to bring it up. And there is also a story that there is another Panchen Lama, outside of this, the one that the Chinese have hidden away, and that the reincarnation may have already happened, and the news, and that it has happened outside of China. And these are all stories that are doing the round. Nobody is denying them. So it makes it very interesting. The takeaway here is, what happens next, in your opinion? China is on the precipice of collapsing. I have been watching some of the misinformation that is being put out against India, especially during the Op Sindhu days. It shows a certain amount of desperation, in my opinion. Your thoughts on where things are headed from here?
I completely agree with you, Sri, that there is a significant amount of desperation that you can see from the Chinese propaganda accounts, online, social media, so on and so forth. And it is sometimes I find it pretty ridiculous, and it gives away more than it hides. Because I actually responded to some of those people, and I said that, look, you may be showing all these glitzy, what you have in your background, the Shanghai skyline, with the neon lights and the electric cars. That's all said and done. At the end of the day, just the desperation that you guys are showing after Operation Sindoor actually gives away a far bigger piece of information. And you guys got to go back to the drawing board, because you are doing pretty bad propaganda for yourself. And I agree with you. I think this bodes well for the rest of the world. It shows that China is on a brink, and it is trying to make up with chest beating and bravado. Operation Sindoor kind of exposed their defense industry's weaknesses, as well as their, all the so-called 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th generation. They just keep slapping generations in front of whatever they're doing. And I'm sure they're doing good research and all. But there is a difference between having good research and implementing it where the rubber meets the road. And I see that way behind. When it could also be that the Pakistanis were just bad users of those machines, and we have to be cognizant of that. But at the end of the day, it's a positive sign for the rest of the world to see the way China is acting. I also think that overdoing what China has been doing, especially its Hanification and its over control of trying to control Lhasa and the monasteries, will eventually backfire. And when it backfires, it might cascade in a very negative way for them. I think there is more and more global people-to-people connection that is helping the Tibetan community, because now it's not just the governments and the heads of governments, which China can bully all the time, that are going to decide how the future of Tibet unfolds. It is the people of the world, thanks to social media, thanks to information out there, that have a bigger stake in this game. And all of these bodes well for people who believe in democracy, people who believe in freedom of opinion, and it's not good news for China.
Thank you. So viewers, by the time you see this video, you have already seen my other monologue about explaining how Chinese misinformation ministry is working. I just got one handle, I analyzed it. It was hilarious. And the handle claimed that there's a whole military department that's doing that. So it's really ridiculous that they are going to such great lengths to essentially, paint a pig as a horse. Sehun, your thoughts on, how long can China keep this up? I'll tell you one thing. Practically, I've seen that there are capital controls in China. They welcome all the dollars. They're not allowing dollars to go out. This has been observed for a few years. Now, what was a trickle is now turning into a flood. Even small amounts are not being allowed to leave the country, which tells you that there is something wrong with this whole big picture. How bad do you think China's situation today is? It continues to rattle their sabers, but to what end?
Well, I think this whole fiasco that they just went through with losing the narrative with the Dalai Lama, to them it was a bigger deal than ever before, because and again, I won't go too much into it, but the economy in China is not doing very well. And when President Trump slapped 145% tariffs on them, unlike what their propaganda said, you talk to any legitimate business person or analyst from China or from Hong Kong, every single one of them have agreed that the Chinese government was legitimately scared. So scared to a point where they've publicly viewed Xi Jinping as a failure. Now, that really doesn't happen inside a communistic system, but for them to come out and say, and again, there's two factions within China. There's the Xi Jinping faction, and there's the White Hat faction, which is and coincidentally, you have the Shanghai in the background. They're called the Shanghai Gang, right? And so, and while they're going through that, they also lost the narrative on Tibet, which is extremely devastating, because, remember what Genghis Khan said. Genghis Khan also said that if I can conquer Tibet, I have conquered the entire world. And even from the modern military perspective, right, if you have Tibet, they have the higher ground, right, over all of South Asia. So there's that aspect over there. And so what should be done moving forward in order to further weaken China's paper tiger narrative that's out there, which, it's important to do so, is that there were talks about giving the Bharat Ratna, for example, to His Holiness Dalai Lama, because
Yes.
that would actually mean that what Dalai Lama calls the guru, right, the Dharam guru, right, of the Tibetan people, have recognized their family up north, right, and said that we stand with you, not only in a religious sense, but also in a historical and a people-to-people sense that will outlast any form of government or any form of politics. So I think that should be the next rightful step that should be taken. And I think, and just to finalize it, I would say, look, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said that he is the son of India. And so when a son says, I am your son, no matter what happens, and for India to mother India, they shall call it, right, to grant such honor, it will not only guarantee the Dalai Lama system for the next many centuries, but also it would also reassert the inseparable connection between all Dharmic communities, particularly between those of Hindu and Buddhist religions together.
Thank you so much, Sehun. Thank you so much, Utsav. Viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. The last word has not been said on this. We'll invite both of you gentlemen back, maybe in a few weeks' time as things evolve, to see where things stand. Thanks once again. Namaskar.